Welcome to the Open Minds podcast, where I chat to business owners and professionals about unspoken topics and new ideas. I'm your host, Vicky, and I'm here to get you thinking differently. I'm kicking off this series with a solo episode as I open up about some of my mental health struggles that I face in my everyday life, and one of them is imposter syndrome. And I think it was fitting for this episode because this podcast is something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. Like, I've been talking about this since the start of COVID. So that was 2020. We're in 2023 now. So it's been 3 to 4 years, and it's taken me this long to do it because there's this voice inside my head that's stopping me. And if you aren't familiar with imposter syndrome, it is defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. People with imposter syndrome find it difficult to accept their accomplishments and question whether they are deserving of their accolades. And that's basically just me to a T. So for the past 3 to 4 years, I've been holding myself back from starting this podcast because I was scared. I was scared that people wouldn't listen to it. I was scared that it would be a waste of money. I was scared that people would laugh at me, or I was scared that, putting my opinions out there would lead to a lot of public scrutiny as well. And most of all, I was scared of failure. Instead of thinking that this podcast was going to be successful, my automatic thought was that it was going to fail because this voice inside my head was telling me that I wasn't good enough to make this succeed. It wasn't until the last few months that I started to talk to my clients about starting this podcast. So if you don't already know, I have a business called Sass Nail Artistry. I am a nail artist by trade, and I've built a loyal client base over the last 5 years since I started my business, and I'm very lucky to be able to call these clients my friends. And they've supported me, and they always remind me of how far I've come. And last month in April, we celebrated 5 years of Sass. So I'm very proud and I'm very happy. And I'm very grateful that I've built a business that was able to survive through COVID, through the first 5 years of business, because we know how many businesses fail within the first 5 years. And I am very proud of what I've grown Sass to be today. So 5 years ago, I quit my job and I started Sass, and it was hard. It was really, really hard and really, really scary. I have generalized anxiety disorder, so I am always thinking worst case scenario. I'm always thinking of all the bad things that could happen rather than thinking of all the good things that could happen. So I was in this job that wasn't filling my cup. I was in a corporate admin role. I had been a pastry chef for a really long time. I was working in hospitality after high school, wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, had dropped out of uni courses, and I thought, I'm going to open a cafe. And I was like, I'm going to make cakes in my cafe. So I was working hospitality. I did a patisserie course, and then I was working as a pastry chef. And while doing that, I had this mentality that if you work really hard, if you hustle, you'll be successful. And so basically, I was working 3 jobs at the time. I went back to uni to study food science and nutrition, and I was really, really burnt out. I was so tired all the time. I was depressed because I didn't have a work-life balance. I didn't get to spend time with my boyfriend at the time. I didn't really have time to see my friends. And I was really, really burnt out. So I lost my passion for that. I went and got a admin role. So I was really happy at the start. I didn't have to do dishes. I didn't have to mop floors. I didn't have to do any weekend work or evening work. And it was good at the start, I felt happy. But then a couple of months in, I got really bored, and that's when I realized that I needed something creative in my job to keep my creative juices flowing. So I decided to take a nail course, and then I quit my job. It was really scary, but I knew that because of how burnt out I had experienced in the past, I knew that if I tried to keep this job and tried to start a business at the same time, I would lose my passion for it because I would just be too tired. Like imagine working a 9 to 5 and then coming home, having dinner, and then trying to squeeze in clients as well, and then taking away from your weekends and your days off to do clients. So I decided that it was best for me to just quit my job and go full steam ahead with this. And that was really scary. I have worked ever since I was able to work, and I've always earned my own money, and it was scary to not know what was going to happen because I didn't have any clientele. I didn't have any experience. I was coming straight out of my nail course. So it was scary because I didn't even know if this was going to work out. And because of my anxiety and my imposter syndrome, my initial thought was like, this is going to fail. But eventually I talked myself into it and I said, you know what, if it fails, that's fine. We can try something else. Right now, you're not happy in your job. You want something more. And if you don't try, you're never going to know. So that was the push that I needed to start this business. And in the beginning, I didn't make any money. So I didn't have space at home to work from home. So what I had to do was look for a space to rent. So I was looking for rooms inside beauty salons that I could rent because I didn't know how much money I was going to make. My budget was quite low. I eventually found a space that was a little bit over my budget, but it was in a good location. The salon looked clean. The room was a decent size because I did go and look at some salon spaces and some of them were cheap, but they were like the size of a toilet, like it was tiny. So I finally found a space that I felt like I could see myself working here and building a business. And I was doing sets for like $10, $20. Like I just wanted to practice and get my skills up. And then all the money that I was making from that was going back into the business. So buying all the colors, buying all the nail art, the brushes. If you're thinking of starting a nail career and a nail business, just think about all the expenses that you need to start up because it is quite costly compared to some other beauty industries because you've got to get a whole bunch of colors, like you've got heaps of different tools, you've got lamps, nail drills, stuff, an autoclave, stuff that costs hundreds and thousands of dollars. So think about that before you start. But if you're passionate about it, it's so worth it. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I started this business and I wasn't really making money at the start. It probably took about 6 months for me to really start seeing money coming in. But then that 6 to 12 month mark, I was growing on Instagram, I was getting new clients and I was booking out. So I'm really happy to be able to say that I grew the business quite quickly, and it's not because of luck. I put a lot of hard work into marketing the brand and growing the brand. I did a lot of free work and collaborations, but it's also paid off really well. So yeah, when I talk to my clients about, I want to start this podcast, but I'm scared, like I've never done it before. I'm scared it's not going to work out. And my clients just remind me, well, you started this business from scratch. You'd never started a business before and look where it's got you. And it's true, like this business has been the best thing that I have ever done for myself. And I can't imagine my life being what it used to be anymore. Like sometimes I have dreams. So I used to work in cafes and sometimes I have dreams that like I'm late for a shift or I'm at the shift and I can't wait to finish. And I'm so glad that I have a job that I'm excited to go to work to. I have the freedom to do whatever I want and I have control over who I let into my space. So it's really my clients that reminded me of all the great things that have come from starting this business. And it was the push that I needed to start this podcast because if I hadn't taken that scary leap in the beginning, then I wouldn't be where I am now. So now I have to take this scary leap into this podcast, not knowing what it's going to come from it. And I don't know if what I want out of this exactly, but I just know that I want I want to share my thoughts with people. I want to share my stories and my lessons with people. If you follow me on Instagram, I do this thing called Salon Scenarios. And basically, I put up a fictional scenario and people weigh in on what the person should do in the scenario or whose side they're on. And it really just opens up people's minds to different perspectives and gets people thinking differently. So I basically just want to do that with the podcast and get people to think differently. But through talking to my clients, there's 3 things that really pushed me to get to this point where I'm sitting here today in a recording studio, recording my first podcast. So the first thing that was a turning point for me was when I was chatting to one of my clients and I was telling her about this podcast, and I was like, I'm just so scared that it's going to be a failure, that's not going to work out. And she said to me, she was like, what does it mean to fail at something? And I said, I don't know, it means you're not good at it. And she said, and what does that mean? And I was like, I don't know. It sounds like a trick question, right? And you put on the spot and you're just like, I don't know. And she was like, it means you're trying something new, right? It just means that you haven't done it enough times. It just means that you still need to practice it. And it reminded me that no one starts something and is a professional at it. No one does anything and straight away you're good at it. You might have some natural talent in you, but you don't become a pro from the first time you do it, right? Everything takes practice. And we all start somewhere. And if we want something badly enough and if we're passionate enough, then we keep working at it until it is successful. So that was the first point where I was like, wow, okay, I need to do this. And then secondly, I was speaking to another client about being scared of starting this podcast. And she said, how would you feel if someone took your idea, this idea that you've had for the last 3 years, and they did it before you? And that was a shock to me. And I was like, I'd be mad. I would be really mad. And initially I wanted this podcast to be specifically about beauty because I'm in the beauty industry and I had this name for it and everything seemed perfect and I've been sitting on it for 3 years. And then as I'm researching this podcast and trying to get this project rolling, I researched the name and it's been taken. This name that I have wanted has been taken by someone who started a podcast 2 months ago. And I just thought, wow, I had this idea 3 years ago. I've sat on it for so long and now someone else has done it and they're talking about beauty things as well. And I was mad. I was mad at myself. I was disappointed in myself and I hated myself a little bit. And I messaged that client. Mind you, all of my clients are friends, but I'm just going to say client. So I messaged her and I told her what happened and I said, thank you, because this is the push that I needed to start this podcast. Because if I wait another 3 years and someone else takes my ideas, I'm going to be so mad at myself. So that was the second turning point. And lastly, I was telling a client how scared I was. And mind you, this client/friend, she has a podcast as well. And I just kept saying I'm scared it's not going to work out. I'm scared it's going to be shit. And she was like, why do you keep saying it's not going to work out? And I was like, oh, wow. I don't know. And she's like, I think it's a great idea. You're talking to me about it and I'm so excited to listen to it. Why do you keep saying that it's not going to work out? And I just thought to myself, I don't know. It's just my automatic thought that something bad is going to go wrong and it's not going to work out and it's going to be a failure. So I was setting myself up for failure because I didn't even believe in myself. And I had no proof to back this theory that it wasn't going to work out because I hadn't even started it. It wasn't even a thing yet. So how can I say it's not even going to work out when I haven't even tried it? So that's when I started to shift my thinking. And obviously, my friends and my client helped with this as well. I started telling myself that the podcast was going to work out. I started finding evidence that it would. So everyone I spoke to about the podcast, all my friends and my clients, they're like, oh my God, that sounds like such a good idea. That's going to be so good. I love that. So they were interested. I'd already done a small amount of market research without even knowing, and people were interested in it. And I had already grown a social media following on Instagram, and people were interested in what I had to put out to the world. So why wouldn't people be interested in what I had to put out as a podcast? And then lastly, I looked at all my friends who had started podcasts and they were successful. And I thought, well, they're a normal person like me. If they can do it, why can't I? But obviously, things are always easier said than done. And it's taken a couple of months for me to get to this point, to book in the studio, to drive myself here. Like, even coming here, I was like, this is scary. Like, maybe I shouldn't do this. Like, maybe I'll just cancel. And like the last couple of nights, I haven't been able to sleep because I'm stressed, but I'm also excited. But I'm here and I'm happy. I'm happy that I'm here. But it's hard because that imposter syndrome is still present. There's a voice that's still inside my head that's telling me that it's not going to work out, that it's going to fail, that bad things are going to happen. And it's funny because as a nail artist, I have people telling me every day how amazing I am, how talented I am, how much they love my work, how happy they are with their nails. And it's like, I don't believe it because I think that I'm not good enough. Like in my head, I'm just like, oh, like I'm okay. Like I'm good, but I'm not as amazing as all these people are saying that I am. And through therapy and through self-awareness, I've realized that it's partly due to the fact that my mum doesn't tell me that she's proud of me. I have Asian parents. I'm obviously Asian. And I think it's very common in Asian cultures and in ethnic cultures to not really acknowledge your children's achievements. Like it's not a very nurturing style of parenting. So when I was younger, my mum was always pushing me to be better. And I don't think she had bad intentions for it. I'm not bad mouthing my mum in any way. I love my mum. We haven't always had the best relationship, but since I've gotten older and she's gotten older, we get along much better. And she is the most strong and resilient person I know. And in my darkest days, in my darkest moments, I think of my mom and I think of everything that she's overcome, and it honestly gives me strength to push forward. So I love my mom. Although she tried to do the best for me and push me to be the best version of myself, it sometimes had a negative impact. So whenever I would come home and I'd be like, oh, I got an A on my test, she'd be like, oh, well, next time you should aim for an A+. And even though she didn't say, good job, I'm proud of you, she probably was proud of me. She just didn't say it. And then I'd get an A+ and she would be like, okay, well, next time you need to aim for 100%. So do you see where this is going? Like she was constantly pushing me to be better. But because I didn't get that positive reinforcement, I always felt like I wasn't good enough. And so I've lived like that for so long that my automatic thinking is that I'm not good enough. And I think a lot of people with immigrant parents could relate to this because they've possibly come from a place where, you know, it was a poorer country or money was harder to make, and you really had to push and be the best of the best so that you could, you know, provide for your family and get a good job and things like that. So I understand where it comes from, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing. So I basically had to grow up being compared to other children as well. So some of you might be able to relate to this. So my mom had a lot of friends whose kids were very academically intelligent. So they were getting scholarships to private schools. They were getting, 99 ATARs. They were going like scholarships to uni. They became med students and doctors and lawyers and surgeons and all that kind of stuff. And then there was me that was kind of just like I'm okay at school, but I didn't try very hard. And part of the reason I didn't try very hard was because nothing was ever good enough. So I kind of just stopped trying. Anyway, so I've spent so much of my life feeling like I'm not good enough. And it's obviously become like an automatic kind of thinking. And I had realized that I had placed my self-worth into the hands of someone else. I had placed my self-worth into the hands of my mom. And because she never said that I was good enough and that she was proud of me, I felt like I wasn't good enough. I actually got the first "I'm proud of you" last year from my mom. It was a magical moment. It was when I did my first masterclass up in Gold Coast with Jess of Onyx Files. And I was telling her about it and she's like, "I'm so proud of you." And I was like, wow, what a moment. And maybe she said it in the past, but I just don't remember. But I feel like I would remember something like that. But anyway, I know now that she's proud of me. Like, I know that just because she doesn't say it doesn't mean she's proud of me. She might show it in other ways. It's like Asian parents not being like physically affectionate. Like, we don't hug, we don't kiss, we don't really say "I love you," but they might cook your favorite foods. They might look after you when you're sick. That kind of thing. So I think recognizing that just because she's not showing it in the way that I want it to be shown doesn't mean that she's not proud of me. And I can't put my self-worth into the hands of someone else because I can't control what someone else says or does or thinks. And I need to take back that power and put that self-worth back into myself. So to try and overcome imposter syndrome, I have taken back that control, and it is difficult. It is really hard because you've thought about this for such a long time. You've thought this way for such a long time, and now you have to alter your thinking. It's like a behavior that you do every single day, and then suddenly you've got to change it. It is hard, but it's not impossible. So to do this, I remind myself that I am a human. I make mistakes. I'm allowed to make mistakes. And if I'm creating 100 sets of nails and they're beautiful, and my clients love them and everyone's telling me how much they're amazing, and I make one mistake, that's okay. I am not a failure. I shouldn't quit doing nails. I shouldn't quit my business. I am allowed to make mistakes and I will learn from it. And mistakes are what makes you grow. I remind myself that I have a beautiful audience and such sweet people who are constantly telling me how talented I am and how much they love my content. And my loyal base of clients speaks for itself. Like, I have clients that have been with me since day one. So if one nasty troll comment on the internet comes along, I shouldn't let that question my self-worth, because who is this person to me? And you're comparing one small, tiny, bad, negative thing compared to hundreds of really good things. So it's difficult because I feel like our brains work in a way where we fixate on like the bad, but I think you just have to learn to look at the bigger picture and see like this tiny small percentage of bad versus all of the good. I also remind myself that just because I'm not where I want to be doesn't mean that I'm not good enough. It just means I'm on my way there. So when I look at my idols and I look at these nail artists that have been doing it for like 10 years and they've got like hundreds and thousands of followers, and they've got multiple salons and they're doing what I want to do, I just remind myself that maybe they've been doing this for longer. Maybe they've had more training. Maybe they've had more investors. Maybe they've put in more work than me. And I look back at where I started and I remind myself of how far I've come, and it makes me proud of myself. It honestly makes me proud of myself because I look back at where I was in 2018 and I see how much the business has grown and I see how much my work has improved. And I remind myself that I'm not at the finish line. I'm still on my way there. So one day I'm going to get to that point. And just because I'm not there yet doesn't mean that I'm a failure. The other thing is I'm not in competition with anyone else except for myself. I am only competing with who I was yesterday, last month, last year, the last 5 years. And as long as I'm constantly moving forward and doing better, even if that's not linear, even if it's taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, as long as I am proud of who I am and I am constantly moving forward, then that's all that matters. So I just remind myself to stay in my lane. Don't focus on what other people are doing, because that's taking energy from focusing on what I should be doing. And it's hard because, I go on social media, I see people opening salons, I see people traveling overseas for work, and it makes me feel like I need to be doing more. And it's funny because in the last few months, I have felt really stagnant in my career. I felt like I'm not really moving anywhere. I'm kind of just like doing the same things. And I took a step back. I looked at where I was last year. Last year, around this time, I did my first masterclass. And since then, I've taught so many students. I've brought out new courses. I'm working on some other stuff as well. And I thought, wow, it's only been a year since I started teaching and I feel like I'm not growing. Like, it seemed a bit silly when I thought about it that way, because I am doing something more than I was last year. So this is your sign. If there is something that you've been scared to do, a project you want to start, a new hobby, maybe going to a Pilates class or something, a business, whatever it is, ask yourself, what is it that scares you? Are you scared of embarrassing yourself a little bit? Because I was scared of embarrassing myself, but I got myself here. Are you scared of losing money? Well, money comes and money goes. Versus what could go right? Are you creating a better life for yourself? Are you doing something that you've always dreamed of? Are you bringing in a new stream of happiness into your life? Would you rather step out of your comfort zone and decide something wasn't for you, or look back later in your life wondering the what ifs? And to the people that believed in me, all my friends and clients, everyone that supported me, grounded me, encouraged me, sent me the pep talks, to led me to this step, to sitting here in this podcast recording studio, recording my first podcast. No matter what happens from here, whatever happens to this podcast, I am grateful for your support. I am grateful for all of your advice and all of your feedback. So thank you. I'm proud of you guys for supporting me, and I'm proud of myself for taking the scary leap. I haven't been sleeping properly because I'm so scared. I've lost my appetite. I'm pretty sure I have stomach pains from like the anxiety, and my body is so tense right now. But I'm here. And to be honest, it wasn't as scary or as hard as it was, as I had like made it in my mind. Like, once I got here, everything was fine. And I always like think about when I used to work for someone else and I had to put in like my annual leave. And it's like such a scary thing because you're scared of like them asking questions or like, being like, no, you can't take this annual leave. And, you're like thinking of all the scenarios in your head and it's really scary. And then you go to your boss or your manager and you ask for leave and they're just like, okay. And then you're like, I just wasted all that stress and energy and anxiety for nothing. So that's what I kind of liken this to. Like I built all this stress and anxiety up for like the last few weeks leading up to this point. And now I'm here, I'm like, okay, this is fine. So I hope this episode has inspired you to step out of your comfort zone and opened your mind to a new way of thinking. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. It would mean a lot. As it is a new podcast, any kind of engagement and traction would mean so much to me. In the next couple of episodes, we're going to chat to some guests about doing celebrities' nails, why makeup costs more when you add the word bridal, and then we're going to get some different perspectives on some salon scenarios. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.